Hello and welcome to episode 254 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. This week, my local government doubled the road tax on electric vehicles. The money goes to fixing highways outside the city where I never drive my Nissan LEAF EV. Naturally, I'm livid and have written a 25-page rage-filled rant for your listening pleasure.
Ooh, I can't wait. California has a plan to deploy 6 million heat pumps by 2030. The California Heat Pump Partnership has planned initiatives like Heat Pump Week. Lord knows there's so little to do in California, residents will be thrilled to have a whole week devoted to complicated machinery.
The Clean Energy Show joins the world in mourning the loss of the internal combustion engine. Chinese battery and car maker BYD just fired the final fatal shot. In lieu of flowers, pour a cup of oil into the Gulf of America.
London is going to deploy 570 charging ports that sit flush with the sidewalk. The only opposition so far is from dogs and hobos who are worried about the effects of urinating on a high-voltage power connection.
Okay. All that and more on this edition of the Clean Energy Show.
All right, so I'm off to Fargo, North Dakota this week for the Fargo Film Festival. We're going to leave this afternoon.
Well, there's no blizzards, are there, this year? You had one last year, and there was one on the weekend.
It was 2 years ago, I think,
okay.
Where we just barely made it before a massive, massive blizzard. And then I went on endlessly about how good the snow clearing is there in Fargo. But yeah, really looking forward to it. It's a fun place. There's a new story this week. Car trips to the U.S. from Canada are down 23% versus last year. And this is a result of the ongoing trade war between the two countries. So I don't know if a 23% hit on their tourism is going to affect them or not, but that's a pretty significant number.
All right. Well, not to offend our American listeners, but don't spend too much money or you'll offend, the Canadians who are buying Canadian.
Looking forward to supporting our lovely, lovely friends in Fargo at the Fargo Film Festival. But for every evening screening in the festival, somebody plays the pipe organ for about a half an hour, and the keyboard rises out of the floor at the front of the auditorium, and they play pipe organ music for half an hour, and then it falls back into the floor. It's fabulous.
You should have made a silent film to play there. That would
yeah. Yeah, you know what? I should
with me in it, because then I wouldn't have to remember any lines. I just move my lips, and then we put on
Remembering
words.
lines is the worst.
Well, Brian, Friday, that's the day that the government, when they announce things on Friday, it's bad. They don't want anyone to know.
Yeah.
You know how I learned that? The West Wing. The West Wing was garbage day for news. So you put out all the crap you didn't want anyone to write about or get too much attention in the news cycle on a Friday, and that's what they did. They did it. They doubled. If it wasn't bad enough, some places, some jurisdictions have a tax on EVs to make up for the road tax that is in gasoline when you buy gasoline and diesel.
Yeah, and governments around the world have set up their tax structures so that they expect a whole bunch of revenue from gasoline. And of course, it hasn't started to dwindle yet in most places, but that revenue is eventually going to go away.
So 150 was bad enough when they first put it out. There was a charity that offered to pay it for everyone. I took them up on that.
Yeah.
Because I'm poor. And gas drivers pay about 15 cents a liter right now on gas tax, which now a liter is about $1.50 Canadian for a liter of gas. And so 15 cents of that isn't much. Prices fluctuate a lot more than that, up and down. Yeah, so the amount we drive our Bolt per year means we'll pay almost twice what a gas car would pay in road tax. So they're punishing us. It's a political...
Yeah.
Keep in mind, we live in a petro province here in Saskatchewan, right next to Alberta. These two provinces have recently instated EV taxes. I think they're the only jurisdictions in Canada. There's quite a few in the United States, and of course they're in red states. We don't have that many EVs. I mean, we've got a lot more than we used to, and you can't go without seeing them. So I'm sure that's freaking out the oil people around here and the oil politicians, and that's what's really going on here. So, yeah, I have to pay twice the road tax, and I'm pissed off.
And you have
it gets worse,
two
though.
EVs.
Yeah, I got two
adds
EVs.
up, especially when you have two, yeah.
Yeah, so that's $600 a year for our family, and we're going to have to cut back on some things. We live paycheck to paycheck. The amount I drive my Leaf, it makes it even worse, Brian, because that's my city car. A lot of people have city cars, whether it's combustion or not. You have a second vehicle just for driving the kids to school or soccer practice or groceries. Some, going to work for one of the spouses. Mine doesn't do very much. So I would pay, if it were a gas car, the amount of driving, I would pay $50 a year, not $300, maybe even less. So it's like 6 times. I'm paying 6 times. And that tax goes on to highways to fix highways. I don't drive on highways. People with city cars don't make it out to the highway. At least here in Saskatchewan, there's no reason to. They're screwing us. And it's my response to that is it's not going to do anything, oil politicians. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to school you on what's really going on in the world with a very long little essay that I have to educate you, because I think you're idiots, frankly, and you need to learn what's going on in the world. Obviously, you're not listening to this podcast, which is the start of all knowledge, Brian, is listening to this podcast, as you know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and Brian, it's so bad, I haven't even told my wife. I can't break it to her because we have other financial problems.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll listen to the show. I just can't pile this on top of everything else that's going on in our family right now. So why Mark Rober, you probably don't know who Mark Rober is, but my family does. We watch Mark Rober videos. They're educational, supposedly. Have you ever watched a Mark Rober video before?
I think I have watched a couple, yeah.
I guess he's a former NASA engineer, and he's taken to YouTube, and he starts making educational videos. Well, he's been an avid Tesla owner for some time. He did some autopilot tests, and I thought it was kind of funny, and he probably thought it was kind of funny. He made a fake wall on a road that looked like a Wile E. Coyote. Yeah, something that we would be accustomed to, which is the Warner Brothers cartoons that were made in, the 50s, and then replayed on Saturday mornings in the 70s when we were kids. And, we watched them all the time, and they were funny. Well, he drove it into that with autopilot, and it's kind of broken the internet, so I just wanted to mention it quickly, because the Tesla cultists are freaking out and they're mad that this makes Tesla look bad, and other people, the haters, are jumping on, hey, look at that, I told you so, Tesla sucks. So there's a lot of negativity about it and a lot of discussion going on. But what I found interesting was that autopilot disengaged 14 frames before the crash, 14 video frames, which is half a second, generally speaking. And so Electric says that a lot of cases, when it knows it's going to crash, it disengages autopilot, so they can say, well, I don't know if this is why they do it, but they always say autopilot was not engaged during the time of this accident. Well, now we can't really trust that if it disengages a half a second before and knows it's going to crash. Anyway, nothing that happened in the video was surprising, because Tesla has camera-only autopilot for the highway. So I knew that it would crash into it. It's crashed into white trucks before. Like, I didn't really think that it would stop. I guess I kind of thought it was possible. And then they used cars with LiDAR that, of course, saw it and could see it through smog and see children. They did some tests with children, which the Highway Safety Institute kind of does sometimes as well. But yeah, that's there. The link is in your show notes if you want to look at that. I have no real comment on it. I don't think anyone's surprised by it, but for some reason, Tesla stock went down a bit more, and they blamed it on this video, which I thought was weird, because they blamed it on 3 YouTubers.
You should always be suspicious when someone says they know why a stock went down. No one knows why stocks go up or down. From Canary Media, California Heat Pump Partnership has announced the nation's first statewide blueprint for a plan to switch to heat pumps. They're hoping this is going to serve as a national model. This goal was originally set in 2022 by Governor Gavin Newsom, the goal to have 6 million heat pumps by 2030. They've already done 1.9, which is pretty impressive. But according to that rate, they were going to miss that target, and may still miss that target. But they realized that, they had to get together and kind of figure out a way to accelerate things. So the eventual goal is 23 million heat pumps by 2045. So, the target of 6 million by 2030 probably should be higher. But, California is hoping to go completely carbon neutral by 2045. So that's when they would need all of them.
Well, California is a great place for a heat pump because it doesn't get that cold. It gets cold, but doesn't get below heat pump threshold of, say,
Yeah.
works very well to minus 15 very efficiently, I would say.
No, and I have an uncle who lives in Los Angeles, and I don't think they have any kind of furnace in their house.
Is that
It's
right?
like they just, they have electric blankets, and then, I don't know, maybe they have space heaters or something, but I don't think there's any central heating.
Well, that's cool, because then you don't have to pay a gas connection. They probably have
Yeah.
electric water heating as well, I imagine.
Probably, yeah. But of course, anyway, so it's a consortium of all the interested parties, and they're just basically coming up with ways to juice this up and get it going. We talked a couple of weeks ago about in England, they're doing heat pump visits where people can open their homes. So they're not planning to do that exactly, but sort of home expo type things where people can go and, because it's still a confusing topic. People don't know what a heat pump is. People don't know how they work. There was a nice link here from the Washington Post. Electrified DC put on a fair last year, which again was like a home show where they had a big, exhibition room where they had sort of fake houses built and people could go in and tour and find out how this works. They have set in place the Heat Pump Access Act in California, and this is all about reducing the paperwork. This is a favorite topic of ours. Installing anything, major and electrical often takes permitting, and often there's a lot of red tape. Places that remove that red tape tend to get these things deployed more quickly. So, I think we both agree that these kinds of transitions are inevitable, but governments can either help a little bit or they can hurt a little bit. So in the U.S. right now, the federal government is kind of hurting things a little bit, but states like California are helping things a little bit. I don't know if it's a wash, but of course we would certainly prefer it if all governments helped just accelerate these things forward in the right direction.
Come to think of it, maybe it's too warm in LA to really get a payback of a heat pump because you're not using it quite as much.
Yeah, because they do tend to be more to install. And of course, they don't have the cheapest electricity prices in California.
Well, yeah,
either.
that would maybe make a difference then too, because if you are using electricity to heat, this would be a lot more efficient, 300% efficient. But then also, like I'm thinking also, if you're heating your water with electricity, which it sounds like a lot of people do, if your relative is any indication, then maybe a heat pump water heater is maybe your first step.
Yeah, and that's part of the plan for sure. Like, if you're already heating your water with electricity, definitely go with a heat pump version. But they do cost more upfront, might save you some money in the long run, but that's why we need regulations to help sort of steer these things in the right direction.
Yeah, and a heat pump water heater, I think are you thinking of getting one?
Been planning to. It's time to bug my guy again. He was going to do it a while ago, and I got to get back on that.
So you tracked one down? Because they're kind of hard to find a little bit, aren't they? There's not a huge selection of them.
Yeah, that's true. There wasn't a huge selection. Yeah, we picked one out, and we ordered it as far as I remember, but a few months have gone by now, and it's time to check in.
So my understanding in a lot of installations in the States is that heat pump water heater will actually make your room that it's in cold. It'll take the...
we'll have to figure that out. I was concerned about the noise because I know they are noisier than a normal heat pump.
Where's your water heater? Is it downstairs?
Yeah, it's in the furnace room, which is right near where I am, but it shares a wall with my home theater, so I would love to keep my heating and cooling equipment as quiet as possible so it doesn't interfere too much with the home theater.
Well, you can't mess with your home theater, Brian. I mean, Jesus, you'd have to put in soundproof walls or something.
Yeah, you need two layers of walls. I've done the reading on this. You need basically two whole walls with a 1 or 2 inch gap in between them. That's how you soundproof.
Really? Okay. All right. Well, here we go. Wish me luck. Local hillbillies double EV road tax credit. Where do we live, Brian?
We live in Saskatchewan.
Where's that?
Above North Dakota.
Okay. In Canada, in the western part of Canada, a vast prairie province of 1.2 million people in a rectangular-shaped, huge mass of land with very straight roads, as we found out from a YouTuber who visited here a few weeks ago, or last summer, and posted it a few weeks ago. It's a province where political leaders seem to get their news from Facebook. They're really not that informed. And I'm talking about all the major political parties here, not just the ones that are in power here, which is a right-of-center party. They seem to get their outlooks on the future for the oil industry. So I'm going to set you motherfuckers straight. So I'm hoping that some politician somewhere will listen to this and actually get their facts straight, because they are banking on oil lasting forever. It's going to last forever, but it's just not going to last the way they want it to last. The road transportation demand is not what they think it's going to be. The bastards have increased taxes on people like me who drive EVs to punish us. And no, there's no EV tax credit here, is there? There's nothing like that here. It's doubling the tax, which was already really kind of dicey. I mean, To be fair, it is true that a lot of people on the Facebook groups seem to be well off. Not hugely well off, but they're not going to take a huge hit on this.
EVs are still expensive where we live, so they do tend to be owned by people who are more well off.
But if you try hard and you are like me, you still can do it. But the fact is, most people don't want to go to that much trouble. I have a lot of friends who don't walk the walk, but they do a lot of talking about how they're concerned and want to do something and set an example, but they never do. Yeah, it's doubled the annual fee on cars who are EVs from $150 to $300 a year, so that gets added to your plates when you register it. It works well as a tax at the gas pump, because the more you drive, the more tax you pay, the more road use you use. Not so here. Having this high, flat tax on EVs not only assumes you drive twice as much as your combustion driving neighbor, which of course you don't, it also assumes that you drive on the highway, which I don't with my Leaf. Many people like me have an EV they just use for city driving and never drive outside the city on highways where the tax money is going to fix roads. So, Brian, I'm totally getting screwed. Overall, it now means EV owners pay almost twice the road tax as gas and diesel, and there's no EV incentives. It's odd, and I find it a little suspicious. I will have to pay 6 times the road tax on my Leaf as a typical gas driver pays, because my city car doesn't rack up the same amount of kilometers as the average driver. That's pretty gross, to punish an EV driver with 6 times the tax. This will be a burden to my family, and I'm not happy about it, or have to stretch our dollars, and this is really not helping. So why did the government create such a high tax on EVs? It wasn't because we weren't paying our fair share. The question is, why do they want us to pay twice our fair share, and even much more in some cases, like my Leaf? A Honda Accord, Brian, driving the Canadian average, which is person drives about 15,200 kilometers a year here, they would pay approximately $159 per year buying gas to 15 cents a liter road tax, okay? And now we, driving something similar, say a Model 3, Model Y, would have to pay twice as much. It's crap, and no one's talking about it. Everyone in the EV community seems to be rolling over with it. It's just, I will save $300 a month in gas, so who cares? Well, remember, it's a tax on the gas that the opposition, NDP, even the centrist party, wanted to put on pause for several months, that gas tax, to make it, the cost of living acceptable, which was a pisser, because we have a carbon tax. We used to have a carbon tax. Carbon price, on gasoline. But yeah, they're silent on this. They haven't said a damn word, because they're with the oil industry too. Populist nonsense that they wanted to pause the tax on the election promise. The first thing they were going to do, their number one priority, was pausing the gas tax to make life affordable for people. And yet we double the tax just for EV drivers. For some reason, what's going on here? I have some theories, Brian. It's could be virtue signaling to their puppet masters in the oil and gas industry, their biggest donors, by the way. And if so, what would that accomplish for either the oil companies or the 2 major Saskatchewan political parties who seem to kiss the rings of their oil overlords? Is it to comfort their oil friends? Sometimes I think that's what they're doing, who face an existential crisis from the electrification of transportation. And yes, that gets scarier. The more Teslas you see on the road, you probably can't recognize the non-Teslas. I parked beside a Jaguar I-Pace at the medical clinic the other day. Wow. Didn't know it until I was right there. You can't see them from a mile away. Teslas stand out, but not the other electric vehicles, which they probably don't know exist. Yes, we have a small population, and they probably think that somehow they can slow down that transition away from fossil fuels just for the 1.2 million people who live here, but it's probably more to make their oil company friends happy. I wouldn't put it past them to think that they think that all electric vehicles are Tesla, so maybe we're punishing Elon Musk with the whole tariff threat against Canada, but I don't think so. But it's possible, because they're that stupid, frankly. There are 40 million electric vehicles in the world, and only about 5 million of them are Teslas. You see an electric vehicle in the world, they're not all Teslas, but these yahoos who run our government and get voted in by other yahoos probably think that's the case. This year, another 20 million EVs will be sold. That's half the existing amount of electric vehicles in the world already. That's a scary thing if you're an oil fan. 1.5 billion of them will be Teslas. So most of the vehicles are not Teslas, right? Maybe it's just hurt feelings. I mean, the news out of China that they've already peaked road fuel demand must be chilling for certain people around here. I get the sense that the center-right party, Saskatchewan party, and the center-left, more center, NDP, don't actually know what's going on in the world when it comes to energy transitions. I'm going to school you people right now on this show. I don't know if you're listening, but maybe you are, and you'll get smart. You know, even the energy transition, the phrase, is not something that they've ever uttered. Neither of these political parties will talk about that because it's scary to their oil friends and to the fact that we get so much revenue for our province. But that's a problem if you and I, Brian Stockton, can see the future quite clearly. We know that things are going to change that way, so you damn well better be diversifying, and they're not. Let's take a look at what's actually going on outside the political bubble in Saskatchewan. Let's start with this. It turns out, Brian, there are people in the world, even politicians, get this, who care about their children.
What?
It doesn't seem that way around here.
What?
But there are people that are politicians that give a flying F about their children and grandchildren and aren't ready to send their futures under the bus. They're not ready to do that. Let's start with bursting our politicians' bubble on the common assumptions around here, okay? We got lots of common assumptions in Saskatchewan. One is that EVs are for the woke. They're expensive and no one wants them. Wrong! Here's a fact that turns up over and over in surveys. Over 90% of people who've ever owned an EV say they'll never buy a vehicle with a gas tank again. Why is that? Because they're better.
They're better.
The ownership experience is better. Not going to a gas station is better. Driving cheaply is better. Driving with luxurious fast pickup and quiet sound is better. It's a secret that Brian and I happen to share because we own EVs. EV ownership is vastly better than internal combustion vehicle ownership. In fact, it's not even close. And I know these guys won't believe me when I say that. I know all their fans on TikTok will be making comments about this video and getting angry, but let's keep going. You'll probably be surprised that most people buy EVs primarily for the better technology, not to save the planet. That's actually number 2 or 3 on their list on surveys. They study this stuff. Often at the fact that it's cheaper to own and operate than a gas car, and getting cheaper all the time, especially if you live in other countries that don't tax Chinese EVs with a 100% tariff. There are studies on this, and they often get printed in something called newspapers. Now, I know a lot of people don't read newspapers these days, but it's a better source of information than Facebook memes, which is where they seem to be getting their information from, or just talking to their oil friends on the golf course. It's scary to think that people buy EVs not because they have the woke virus, but because EVs are a better product with a better and cheaper ownership experience. Oil is a world market, so that makes things tricky for our Saskatchewan oil politicians. And used to thank God for China. They did. They said, China is our savior. China's going to save everything. You found out that they actually love EVs, and 60% of new car sales had a plug there this year, 60%, and it was close to 50% last year. And I guess they don't have the same prejudice as you. If you've never had a car before in your life, you're not going to care if you have to plug it in instead of going to a gas station. In fact, if they went to a gas station, they'd probably say, why the hell am I smelling gasoline all over myself? This stuff is disgusting and carcinogenic. And they're not going to care that it takes 15 minutes instead of 5 minutes to fuel if they've never owned a car before. But even that's changing. There are no expectations about how cars should work in the developing world where you put all your expectations on the oil growth. Even the Chinese oil companies are saying it's over. In fact, crude oil may have even peaked last year, they say. If not then the peak will turn out to be this year or next year. That's a scary thing because we all know oil markets like growth. It'd be a terrible shame if oil prices fell to $50 or $60 per barrel like shale impresario Scott Sheffield expects. It starts to be a problem because our oil isn't exactly the cheapest to extract, is it? No. Saudis is. $7 or $8 a barrel you can extract it there. Ours, not so cheap, so who's going to buy ours? Hopefully the cartels keep the prices high and supply low for many decades to come. So thank goodness for the Global South, our new oil savior for growth. The newest knight in shining armor for the oil industry. You see, people in the Global South also want a piece of the middle-class life, and that means a car, a gas car, because they're poor, presumably, because they're not us. So if you're a wise petro cheerleader like Jason Kenney once said, there's no way they're going to be driving Teslas in India. They don't need Teslas there anyway. They got their own EV country, Tata Motors, not to mention electric 2- and 3-wheel manufacturers, huge factories, manufacturing good 2- and 3-wheel transportation using only electricity, and they are hitting it out of the park. As you know, is a very popular 2- and 3-wheel transportation all across the Global South, including Africa. Electric 2- and 3-wheel vehicles are already displacing more oil, Brian, than electric cars. That is how well they are and how fast that is going. It's only going to pick up. How will people in the Global South possibly afford EVs with 4 wheels? Well, let's start with another fact I bet you bastards didn't know. China is now the world's largest exporter of vehicles. And I bet most people don't even know that around here.
No, it's even a surprise to me to hear that.
They seem to make a lot of EVs over there in China, Brian. They figured out manufacturing and vertical integration of their supply chain so well that they're selling EVs very inexpensively. Even half as much as what we would sell them in North America. And of course, they're going to have some things to say about that, but that myth is busted, so let's review. Not all EVs are Teslas. Not all EVs are expensive. China is selling so many, one Chinese car company is having to build its own ships to export them to the Global South. BYD is building its own ships to transport cars. Talk about your vertical integration. Cripes. There's a big appetite for those cars in the Global South. It seems, Brian, if you don't have oil in your country, you don't hate EVs for some reason. Take Ethiopia, for example. They don't have oil. They're exporting oil and getting screwed over by having to do so. They banned the importation of combustion vehicles last year because they refused to bow to oil companies who had them over a barrel, so to speak. They took energy into their own hands, which is something that the oil companies want all to themselves. Well, Peru and Brazil are home to mega ports built by China. In Brazil, the Chinese car company BYD is planning on making factories to produce hundreds of thousands of EVs for the Latin American market. Makes sense because they have a lot of lithium there. EV sales are taking off in Costa Rica, Uruguay, and Colombia too. Other countries like Brazil that do have oil are turning their backs on oil. Norway this year will wind down gas and diesel car sales completely. They're happy to sell their oil to other countries and glut the market, but already their gas stations are starting to sell more electrons and hydrocarbons. Other countries in Africa are going electric too. Kenya, Rwanda, Uganda are leading the way in EV adoption, particularly for 2- and 3-wheel vehicles, which are the most popular there, while others like South Africa are embracing conventional EVs. We know how this goes. It starts slow, then goes fast. We've been doing this for 5 years, and by then, it's too late. So here's the big picture. Chinese car makers are gearing up to sell a massive number of electric cars overseas. Cheaper and cheaper. Meanwhile, forward-thinking countries that aren't reliant on domestic oil are waking up to the fact that they can save huge amounts of money by skipping the adoption of gas-powered vehicles altogether and going straight to electric, just like they skipped telephone lines and went straight to cell phones because it was easier and better. And the smartest ones, while they're seizing the opportunity to create jobs by building EVs and their components locally, the cost of electric vehicles is only going to become more accessible, and 2025 will be a breakout year in multiple markets in the Global South. So, the question is, just how much our Premier knows? I don't think he knows very much, and I have proof. I find it alarming that he doesn't think anyone wants Chinese electric vehicles, because he said that the other day. He can't understand why the federal governments in the United States and Canada put 100% tariffs on Chinese-made EVs. This is what he said at a rural government convention last week.
This is a response to a 100% electric vehicle tariff that Canada put on Chinese electric vehicles. And so when you look at Chinese electric vehicles and you drive around Saskatoon, you don't see very many of them. You don't see very many of them in Canada, or North America for that matter. They're a vehicle that no one wants. And so we tariffed a vehicle that no one wants to protect a North American electric vehicle industry that very few can afford. And the impact of that decision by our federal government is a 100% tariff on Canadian canola oil and meal that's going to China.
Yeah, so he's suffering because we put 100% tariffs on EVs, on Chinese-made EVs.
Yes, because EVs are expensive, and yet no one wants the cheaper ones. He basically contradicted himself in the same little soundbite there.
This guy who's in charge of our province assumed that Biden and Trudeau were so stupid that they randomly put 100% tariff on something. You don't tariff things that people don't want. You tariff them because you're scared as hell they do want them. And they're going to kill your local economy by importing them because they're better and cheaper. So he's just a moron. This is proof. China has fought back and tariffed the canola crops that we make here in Saskatchewan. And he's pissed off about that. He doesn't understand it. He could pick up a newspaper. He could Google something. Is that so hard? He has ministerial assistants. Come on, don't be idiots. He assumed, like many uninformed people, that Chinese EVs are unreliable. And not only that, more expensive than people can afford. The opposite is actually true. The opposite. Often the case with misconceptions in what we talk about on this show. This line of thinking keeps him in the dark to the near-term future of another export of ours, crude oil. Crude oil is crucial to our economy, and he thinks it's going to be business as usual forever. It's not. If he's in the dark about the future prospects of our expensive to extract Canadian crude, he can't prepare the province's economy for what's to come, and all of us are going to be screwed. Unfortunately, the opposition NDP party in our province agrees with him. The extreme level of 100% tariff should tell you something about the product being tariffed. Chinese EVs without any tariffs might be as little as half the price of comparable North American-made EVs. That's why the feds in both countries panicked, because for the time being, we have an auto industry that's very important to our economy, and it would crash it because people would buy EVs half the price, even if they loved gas. They would say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy a car that's half the price, and it runs on electric, and it costs me a fraction of the price to operate it. And then they would find out, hey, EVs aren't so bad. They're great. Mr. Mo assumes he hasn't seen any Chinese EVs around here on the prairies of Canada because no one wants them. Well, China has up until recently concentrated on producing cars for domestic consumption. But Mo seems to assume China can't make vehicles that compare to the good old boys at Ford and GM. I don't blame him. I maybe have wondered that myself until recently, but I'm not running a province, am I? I'm just a podcast. Auto journalists from North America and Europe are raving about the build quality, safety, and design of Chinese-made EVs, and are saying they are often superior to our vehicles in quality. People reviewing Chinese EVs and saying, my God, we are in trouble. My God, the North American auto market is dead. That is why you put 100% tariffs on. I don't necessarily agree with that because I would want to be one of those people who bought a Chinese EV. China hasn't entered our market yet, but they would love to, and they will soon, even with 100% tariffs, because that's how competitive they are. They could probably even compete with 100% tariffs. They are better at manufacturing and supply chain integration. I mean, what's better than, a ship? Build your own ships to transport the cars. They also have superior robotics in their factories and own the mines that provide the raw materials. So they own everything, and they have figured out how to do it better than us, which is too bad because I don't see us catching up. We need to catch up, but I don't see any effort into that. The United States is frowning upon education. China is that's where it is at. Everyone's educated. STEM graduates are like crazy. China is coming. Just ask the CEOs of Ford and GM. These see China as an existential threat, and they should. We have oil and auto manufacturing, so they're not going to be the first market they're going to jump into. But in Australia and Europe, Mexico, and parts of South America, you won't have a problem spotting a Chinese EV. And don't assume no one wants one. I want one, Brian. God damn it, I want one. I'd take one today. And I know a long list of people who want one. I wouldn't feel great about buying a car from China, but say what you like about the tenets of communism. At least they don't double the tax on people because they drive an EV. Don't make the same assumptions that we made once about Japanese and Korean vehicles. You remember that, Brian? It used to be that way. I still receive prejudice like 10 years ago from my neighbors saying, well, you wouldn't want to buy a Japanese car because you'll never get parts for it. So it's just bigotry that informs
I remember
these
hearing
people.
that in the 70s, but I'm shocked that anyone says it.
10 years ago. Those aren't hard to find. Those Korean and Japanese cars, are they? And that's going to be the same with Chinese cars. And if crude oil wasn't enough trouble already, BYD just matched the charging time of EVs for refueling them to a combustion vehicle, which we'll have later in the show. So, not good if you're an oil person. All I ask, Brian, of politicians in our two petro provinces is they don't stay stupid. Don't stay stupid. There's a lot of people out there begging them to just learn a few things about what's actually going on in the world. This isn't a conspiracy show. This is, actual journalism that we get our sources from, and statistics with financial newspapers who don't screw around because their information has to be good if you're going to invest. So changes are coming much sooner than you people think, and we have to be prepared or our local economies are cooked.
I love your optimism. That you somehow seem to think it's possible for politicians to not be stupid.
You have to try, Brian. You have to try. I get up in the morning and I try, damn it.
Well, I remember we talked a while ago about Jim Farley told a story on some podcast where he worked at Toyota when he was younger. So this would have been, I think, in the 80s. His first job was at Toyota in Detroit because Toyota makes cars there and lots of places. And it's like people in his extended family would stop talking to him because he was working for Toyota rather than one of the American car companies.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what's going to happen with these tariffs, but there's reporting out of Washington that Trump is serious about screwing over the automakers. They've begged him not to do this. He says, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway, and you're going to have to redo the way you do things. And they're already on the brink. They're already in trouble with the transition. So I don't know what kind of effect. I mean, who knows? It could have a good effect somehow. Sometimes bad things turn into good things, but that's me being optimistic again. I don't know what's going to happen. And I honestly don't know, based on some of the reviews that I've seen, that people who really know the North American cars are saying we're screwed. Because unless we're putting everything we can into matching the Chinese right now, we're never going to catch up. And that's bad for our economy because it's a big chunk of our GDP comes from the auto sector, not just the people who make the cars, but the people who support the making of the cars and the selling of the cars and the fixing the cars. There's a lot going on, and we know the world is changing, and what we talk about is only part of it, but it's a big part of it.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention, and so an existential crisis is maybe what the car companies need, but they're also massive. It's hard to turn a giant ship around, so I don't know.
Yeah.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, we will.
All right, so moving on to our London news roundup. So I'm actually going to go to London this summer on a nice little trip.
Are you going to round up some news?
I'm going to round up some news. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's why these stories caught my eye. I know when I was there last time in London a couple of years ago, I took pictures they have lamppost charging plugins for cars.
Yeah. And are those the ones you bring your own cord to?
Yeah, exactly. It's really like an electrical outlet, and they add them to lampposts. It's a fairly easy thing to do because the electricity's already there. And of course, one of the problems is a place like London, it's very dense. You have a lot of people living in dense housing, apartments and stuff like that. So not everybody has a driveway where they can put in their own plug. So these kinds of roadside charging spots are super necessary for an electric future. So this story from Electrek, the first one, in the borough of Camden in London, they're going to install 570 flat and flush sidewalk chargers. So these are very similar to the ones in the lampposts, but they're just in the sidewalk. I'm not sure how they protect that from, like I said, dogs urinating on it, if this is going to be a problem, but it doesn't seem to be. But the downside maybe is that, yes, the car owner has to then carry the whole unit. Like if you just go to a charger at a gas station, well, you just take the hose and you plug it in. This requires a slightly larger contraption that you have to carry with you. But yeah, super interesting. They did a pilot project, and they say the pilot project went really well. So they're going to continue with this rollout. It's 570. These are just level 2. So this is meant to, park your car for several hours. Most people have to park on the street anyway, so you might as well park where there is a charger and get some charge. There's an app as well that helps you locate these things. They're harder to see because they're embedded in the sidewalk, but presumably you find them through the app rather than, sort of physically looking for them. So They're 22 kilowatts maximum. And
That's pretty
they're just-
good. For level 2, that's
pretty
as
good.
high as level 2 goes.
Yeah.
And there's not that many cars that can go that high. Mine goes 11. I think yours goes a bit higher, does it?
Yeah, no, just 11, but I think, there's a few that can go a little higher. But 22 kilowatts is definitely the max.
But that's
for the
like
level 2.
75 kilometers an hour. That's not bad, eh? Like if you can get
Oh,
that
it's-
much, even 11.
Yeah, no, even the difference between like 7 kilowatts and 11 kilowatts is...
It makes a
is
difference.
worth
I had it at a hotel in Calgary last
Yeah.
summer for the first time that I've ever had level 2 at, the full extent of the car, and it really picked it up fast.
But yeah, especially if you might be parking somewhere to go shopping for a couple of hours.
Yeah.
You with a level 2, you sometimes might need 5 or 6 hours. So obviously,
I used sidewalk charger at a Vancouver beach a couple of years ago, and when we went there, and it was a flow charger. I believe you had to use your app to initiate it. They were all full, and everyone was asking me, "Are you leaving soon? Are you leaving soon?" I said, "No, I'm waiting for my family." I didn't need to charge, but it was nice to be able to charge. I'm sorry, but
Yeah.
So you bring your own cord to this one, right? This is the European way.
Yeah.
But there are some. The problem is that you worry about vandals cutting off for the copper because no one's around. But they are making some, and I think I'll have a story on the lightning round later that has some in North America where the cords will retract. But that gets more complicated and assumably more expensive.
And, this is going to be bulkier, like to have to carry this cable in your car. But obviously, if this is the solution that works for you, then this is the solution that works for you.
Yeah, if you're on like an apartment and you're charging, you park on the street, then that's a great idea. In front of restaurants, shopping, better than going to a supercharger where you have to, pay more money for it as well.
Yeah, and you might have to leave more quickly than you want to. You don't have time to eat a meal at a restaurant if you're at a fast charger because, before you know it, you get a thing, it's full, and, you have to move it or you end up...
You got to pick the right charging speed charger to match the time you're going to be there because you could be done too fast. And basically, the slower the charging, often the cheaper it is. So I think in North America, no one seems to be doing the bring your own cable route. Doesn't seem to be anyways, any examples that I can see. And
of course, we have much more of a car culture here. It's just different, London being so densely populated. Another story from London, this also from Electrek. The London ultra-low emission zone is a success. So they actually have two different things in London. They have a combustion charge, but they have an ultra-low emission vehicle charge as well. And so these apply to kind of different parts of the city. A congestion charge is really just to keep down the traffic, but they also have this ultra-low emission vehicle area in London, and your car basically has to fit certain emission standards, or you just have to pay more money to be there. It's $12.50 a day. That's pounds, about $16 a day. This is 24 hours a day. The restriction is fairly loose, like, gas-powered and diesel-powered cars can still qualify. They just have to have been made in the last 10 or 20 years. It just has to be a modern standard emissions vehicle, which, have lower emissions than 20 years. So that's not super unreasonable.
No.
But it totally works. They've had pollution monitors around London. 99% of them have reported that pollution is down in all of these areas that are supported by these two different things, the congestion zone and the ultra-low emission zone. The nitrogen oxide is 27% lower. For NO and NO2 as a whole, it's down 14%. And the PM 2.5, which is the particulate matter that we sometimes talk about, you don't want PM 2.5 items in your lungs. This is bad for your lungs. This irritates your lungs.
Yep.
So the rates for this 31% lower in these regions.
Gotta love that.
It's amazing, and of course this improves health and health outcomes for people. Like this is probably saving the British healthcare system money because
there was a study in California that in the neighborhood less asthma cases. So I'm sure this will be studied, and this is kind of early days on some of these ULEZ zones. But I breathe a lot of this stuff around here, Brian. Don't care for it.
Yeah.
Would like to see the end of oil.
And I will be heading to London later on in the summer, and I'll see what's new in terms of chargers and sidewalk chargers.
Well, you'll check things out for us. That's good. It's time to dip into the old mailbag. Now, I have to admit, our regular listener, Bob, wrote us a letter, and I found it riveting. It was on the treadmill. Yeah. It was on the treadmill at the gym, at my medical clinic, and I stopped. Stopped to read because it was... I was going, oh, no. Oh, yes. Oh, no. Oh.
Yeah, it's a bit of a good news, bad news kind of story.
I'm afraid so. It says, I just finished listening to your latest podcast and discussion on the ICCU recall for Hyundai vehicles. These are EVs we talked about. My wife purchased, because I was talking about my son's daughter's teacher showed up on my on a speakerphone,
yeah,
wanting to tell me about the Ioniq 6 he drove at school, and it's toast. It stopped working, and there's a recall on these things, and I was very upset because it doesn't look good to his neighbors, to his fellow teachers. It's just a pisser to me that this would happen. So he says, my wife purchased a 2024 Ioniq 5 from Hyundai last July. On Friday, February 28th, she got a pop-up warning on the car while she was backing out of our garage. She pulled back into the garage, and the car died there. Roadside assistance, because it's a new car, was called, and we were informed that the car had to be flat-deck towed to Moose Jaw, our closest dealership. That's almost a 2-hour drive from where Bob lives. This would probably not happen until Monday, he says. This was the middle of the week when he was writing this. Saturday morning, the truck driver called and said he could take the car to Moose Jaw that day so the dealer could look at it first thing on Monday morning. Monday came, and the dealer advised the ICCU was on back order. They were not sure when they would be able to get one. Luckily, we still had her ICE vehicle as a backup. From what we heard, this could take 1 or 2 months to get this problem resolved with Hyundai. But Tuesday afternoon, the dealership called to advise the car was done. A new ICCU, a new fuse, a new 12-volt battery, and updated to the latest software. What? We were expecting 2 months, not 2 days. And unfortunately, I forwarded this to the teacher for him to maybe consider that. On Wednesday, we drove to Moose Jaw to pick it up. That's 2 hours. And I don't know how it happened, but it was a huge shout-out to Moose Jaw Hyundai. That's that town next door to us. I went there recently myself for a medical appointment. After going through this, I would recommend every EV owner get a portable booster. This allowed us to drive the car out of our garage and onto the flatbed truck instead of dragging it out. The tow truck operator was impressed with how it worked. This is one of these little portable charger packs. They're often lithium-ion now. I used to have a lead-acid one for years for boosting cars in case my battery went dead. Use it a lot for some reason. We each have an NOCO GB40 boosters in our EVs. I always thought the first time I would use one would be to boost a stranded ICE vehicle. I was wrong. It worked perfectly on the Ioniq. So good news EV story recall. I hope your daughter's teacher has a fast repair as well. And yeah, like I said, I forwarded to the teacher, but then Bob wrote back a couple of days later, and guess what? I was on the treadmill again. His email writing must happen at the same time as my treadmilling. He says, didn't last. Sad to say the Ioniq 5 is heading back to Moose Jaw, 2 hours away, dead in the driveway again. Ouch.
Yeah, that's too bad. Yeah, so I'm not totally sure what all this problem is, but it's really interesting that he was able to boost it with this little portable booster just enough to get it out of the garage. So I've never owned one of these things, but it sounds like handy if you're frequently needing to boost a car, and just surprised that it works on an EV as well as a gas car.
Well, it's just the 12 volt that you're boosting, and this is what's happening with these cars, is there's something going wrong that it's not recharging the 12 volt. The 12 volt dies, and without the 12 volt having power, the computer in the car can't run, so the car doesn't run. You need the computer to tell it to run, and if the 12 volt's not working, then, that's bad. So this is, I don't know. I think this could grow into a bigger situation, and it's going to be a black mark on Hyundai and Kia because a number of their vehicles are affected. And Brian, Chuck also sent us a note. He said it was about an NPR story that he heard on a company trying to make electric air taxis in time for the LA Olympics.
The small white Aaliyah aircraft buzzes down the runway and lifts into the sky above Utah's snow-capped mountains. It looks similar to any other small plane overhead. It's designed to carry up to 5 passengers, and it is entirely electric.
So, Chuck, we're going to look into that, keep an eye on it, see if that they can get FAA approval. You can listen to the whole thing from a link on our show notes. No, you can't. I don't have the link. Sorry. I thought I did, but Google it. NPR story on air taxi Olympics. You'll find it. Thank you, Chuck, for reaching out to us. I apologize for losing that link, but it's been one of those weeks.
Yeah, so some more feedback here from social media. I imagine this is to do with our local EV road tax that was just instituted. So is this from Blue Sky?
No, I think this one's Twitter.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, Robert, I just checked it completely and almost perfectly. This negates my wife's safe driver discount on our 2022 Ioniq 5. That means we now pay 20% more to register our vehicle because we dare not to purchase and burn gasoline. And we lose the carbon rebate after next month too. So we have a thing here called a safe driver discount. And the longer you drive without an accident or a traffic ticket, the lower your cost is for insurance. But this can all be negated by a ridiculous EV road tax. And of course, one of the things, the excuses that they have for instituting this, EVs are heavier and so they affect the roads more. So Flawed Filter on social media replied to James and said, my EV weighs 8 pounds more than a Honda CR-V. A cat weighs more than that. The difference, of course.
They're not taxing cats, as far as I know.
So if you're carrying your cat in your car, it might make it as heavy as an EV. I guess that's...
So I'm going to pay twice the road tax because I'm carrying a cat. Well, God help us. They're going to come after our cats one day.
Yeah, so EVs are not as heavy as you think. Don't let anyone tell you that. Okay, we love to hear from our listeners. You can contact us by email, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. You can leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/cleanenergyshow. And of course, join our Patreon, which we love to talk about, and you get access to additional content there.
And coming up next, it is the lightning round. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Global battery electric vehicle sales soared 30% in January to February 2025 compared to the year before period, hitting 2.4 million. China led with 1.4 million. That is up 35%. The U.S. surged nearly 30%, 29.9. Mexico more than doubled, while Canada was the only major market to decline, and that's because we just lost our federal $7,000 rebate. Damn it.
Yeah.
Or $5,000, pardon me. $7,000 in the United States, $5,000 in Canada is gone. A different Bob than the one who wrote us earlier dropped us a note to inform us on a story on CN EV News. This is China news. Chang'an aims to validate solid-state batteries in vehicles by 2026 and then move forward with mass production of all solid-state batteries by 2027. BYD and CATL are also planning to produce all solid-state batteries in small batches by 2027. And Simon Enoch, senior researcher at the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, says that a 1,500-kilometer battery range will likely kill the internal combustion engine in cars. And he says, thanks for the podcast from Bob. Brian, I don't think we need a 1,500-kilometer battery.
No, and we don't even technically need solid-state batteries because the ones we have now
If your bladder can last 1,500 kilometers,
yeah,
I want you on the show. Call us.
But solid-state batteries, there's been a lot of promise for a lot of time. It looks like it's finally starting to come true. They should be faster to charge, last longer, longer range. The future is here.
I mean, let's say that it's in a pickup truck and you're towing. You're going to go 600-700 kilometers. Even that's a long way without stopping.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to stop for lunch, people. You got to have a snack. I mean, you can't just make these things for the crazy people who go. I mean, I've done it in my life. I've been young, God knows, but you don't need that. there might be some examples for it. There might be, some robotaxi examples or something like that. Or
let me introduce you to a little invention popular amongst truckers known as the P-jar.
Are you telling me EV drivers are going to have P-jars in the future? The Hyundai Ioniq P-jar option, $27.
It's a possibility.
They have fridges. P-jars. Tesla. I didn't think that phrase would ever be uttered on the show, but here we are. Tesla says Trump's tariffs may have a harmful impact on its company and other automakers. Tesla has sent a letter to U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer, I'm sure he's a good person if he's in the Trump administration, with a warning about the harmful impact on automakers and consumers if Trump tariffs go ahead. VoltPost, this is another charging thing going on. This is, I believe, in New York City, Connecticut. VoltPost, this is a company that makes charging on lampposts. They convert lampposts to chargers for people who are parked on the street.
Yeah.
They're doing a project with, a pilot project with an installation of 100 new AC charging ports on lampposts. And this is, Brian, one that has the cords retract, so you don't bring your own cords. It's a North American thing.
The ones we were talking about in London, it's really just a plug-in in the lamppost, but this looks more like a traditional EV charger. It just happens to be attached to a lamppost and get its energy from the wiring there.
Well, it's time for a CES Fast Fact. When the Chinese automaker and battery maker BYD Zhengzhou factory is fully complete, it will be larger than San Francisco.
That's
now,
pretty big.
Keep in mind that they house their employees by the factory. They'll make dorms and things like that too.
Housing, yeah.
But yeah, this is we see this from YouTubers going over there. They're making cities for their factories. Yeah, we're screwed, Brian. African solar installations are projected to grow by 42% this year. So that's on the upswing. Africa, way to go.
Huge.
3/4 of prisons in England and Wales face a high risk of overheating. That's from Carbon Brief due to climate change. They made their prisons for temperate climates, and now you're getting heat waves that's going to cause some health problems, to say the least, maybe some deaths. U.S. battery capacity increased 66% in 2024. This is from Clean Technica. The U.S. battery capacity. J.P. Morgan, they have cut Tesla's delivery forecast by 20%, and they are actually predicting $120 per share. That is from Inside EVs. Covering every roof with solar could supply, get this, 2/3 of the global electricity that we need, just from solar. So you wouldn't even need to go beyond roofs if you threw some wind in there, right? And geothermal and the hydro that's existing. Crazy. The steepest S-curve for electric vehicle adoption in the world? Well, look at Denmark, Brian. Last month, sales were 66.1% for purely battery electric vehicles and just 2.8% for plug-in electric hybrid vehicles. And 31% had a engine with oil and pistons and all that stupid old school stuff. Analyst prediction within the next 4 years, within the Trump administration's timeline, assuming they don't go on forever, and put his head in a jar, there's going to be a Chinese EV company that is building cars in the United States on United States soil. That is from the Detroit News, which does a lot of covering of the auto industry and is talking to an auto analyst there. This one's from Heatmap News. BLM approved a transmission line for a solar project and said it was part of the energy dominance agenda. This is the United States. Why is that important? Well, this is a Trump administration thing saying, okay, we want to dominate on energy, so you get approval because you get some federal land to do this because we want to dominate on energy. So that's kind of the reverse that we often hear in the news about what they are doing, and that might be a positive sign. And finally this week, the internal combustion engine is dead. May its pistons pump on in car heaven.
BYD, the investors reacting to an event last night, BYD showcasing ultra-fast charging cars, a whole new lineup of models that we based on much more powerful, robust batteries, but critically with super fast charging that basically gives you the same amount of range or power in 5 minutes in the same time it takes to charge a gasoline car. So it's a whole new suite of tech and infrastructure that BYD is banking on to really accelerate the sales of its fully electric EVs.
That's right. BYD has announced its Super E platform. The new 1,000 volt architecture with 1,000 amps of charging will be able to add 2 kilometers of range every second. Don't have enough to go to the store? Charge for 1 second. Making it the fastest charging system for mass market EVs today. Okay, so my Bolt charges at 400 volts. It's got a 400 volt architecture system, so it charges a bit slower. The Hyundais and Kias, some of the newer ones like the Kia EV6 and the Hyundai Ioniq 5, they have 800 volt architecture. Well, this has bumped it up even further because when you increase the voltage, you have less heat when you're charging. So that allows you to charge faster. But this is a megawatt of charging, Brian, and we thought this would only be for semi-trucks. We haven't even seen much roll out yet for that, but that's where we're at for cars. It says it can charge almost as fast as it takes to refuel a regular gas car, which means you'd have to sit with the car. You couldn't go off and have lunch. If you're on the highway going on a trip, you'd have to be with that car. Yeah. You couldn't even go pee at the time and be sure that you're going to be back in time. So BYD's new battery and charging system was capable of providing around 400 kilometers or 249 miles of range in 5 minutes. So yeah, you could drive at least 300 kilometers for 3 hours. You could drive at least for 3 hours on the highway, if not more. And that's as far as I can go. And then you stop, charge for 5 minutes, and you keep going again. But I probably wouldn't charge for 5 minutes, but that's where we're at. To help support the new architecture, BYD will be rolling out its own 1,000-volt capable charging network throughout China and aims to deliver the new platform's full potential at these sites. So you can't charge anywhere like that. They're going to have to make the chargers for this new system. And of course, will trickle down. We've seen that over the 5 years of this podcast. Something fast comes out and it trickles down. It takes a while. Increasing access to thousands of ultra-fast charging stations across China. And of course, this will come other places in the world. So 1 megawatt of charging. Are the lights going to dim in the city when you plug in? It's crazy. So let's look at what other people are doing. Li Auto, the other Chinese big automaker, does 42 kilometers a minute compared to 80. And they charge 500 kilometers in 12 minutes, which is just fine. At least you could get to the bathroom and back without being too late. Mercedes-Benz does 33 kilometers per minute. That's 325 kilometers in 10 minutes. And Tesla is around 18 right now and 275 kilometers in 15 minutes. And you're a Tesla owner. You go on the highway. Mind you, you're a retired man of leisure, but you never make it back in time, you're saying a lot of the times.
Oh, no. A recent trip to Winnipeg and 2 charging stops, and they were both too short.
Here's where it makes a difference. The people thinking about buying EVs who are reluctant, they'll hear that this exists and their minds will change, and that'll be the biggest thing. But in reality, the road trip doesn't work that way. You don't need to do that because, it's just too fast. But there's, I'm sure, examples that will be needed, and you'll probably have to pay more. So why not just take a 20-minute break and charge like an Ioniq 5 and have a lunch and a bathroom break?
Yeah, well, like you were sort of alluding to earlier, we need a choice of charging speed, and that will happen in the future. You'll have the 5-minute charger, you'll have the 10-minute charger, the 30-minute charger, and you just use the one that suits what you need.
But wait, there's more. This 1,000-volt architecture allows the electric motors in these cars, which are fairly heavy, to be lighter. Or you could keep them the same weight and have massive, massive, massive power. They say it has the same power as a 12-cylinder sports car. Supercar, hypercar. In other words, what these cars can do with this platform, they're not going to make these for everyday people, but they could make them to be as fast as any car in the world, $1 million cars, if you wanted to compete with that. The first vehicles that get the new tech, Brian, will only start at $37,000 equivalent USD. So that's below average what a U.S. car, and this is the highest tech there is. And Bloomberg NEF had this comment on the situation. They said this charging technology could broaden BYD's potential market size in more premium car segments. Even so, prices that low are something those outside of China can only dream of. It shows the cutthroat pace of competition and innovation in the EV market and underscores China's lead in EVs on both technology and price. Did you hear that, Scott Moe? Politician in Saskatchewan. Probably not. The company, which only makes hybrid and fully electric vehicles, sold more than 318,000 passenger vehicles last month, up 161% from a year before. That's insane growth. BYD's Super E platform may also pose a competitive threat to CATL, currently the world's largest manufacturer of EV batteries. Li Auto, the other Chinese company, big one there, for example, is using one of CATL's latest generation batteries to enable charging that gives 500 kilometers range in 12 minutes. Along with the new batteries that can charge in 5 minutes, there are new motors, and these are spinning up to 10,000 RPM. It's like 3 times faster what a combustion car can possibly do. And speaking of CATL, Brian, there's more news. They came out with an announcement just after this saying that they've signed a battery swapping, because NIO is the battery swapping car company in China.
Yeah.
They have battery swapping stations, take 3 to 4 minutes to swap the battery out instead of charging it. Well, now I start to have to ask, they're combining with the world's biggest battery maker. So this is going to make things better, make batteries more compatible and more broadly used, and they're going to have more charging stations. But one has to ask now, at 5 minutes, do you swap or charge? Because I'm sure those swapped batteries charge slower because it's cheaper to do it that way and better for the battery. But, we knew this would happen. We knew we would get here. We're here, and now we have to ask the question, swapping or charging? I don't know. Battery swapping allows EV drivers to switch out their depleted battery for a fully charged one, and as long as it takes to fill a gas car, maybe even faster, of course. So I don't know, Brian, but the stocks are all going up for these guys, and it's a major mark on the road to road transportation electrifying. It's probably the death knell for the combustion engine. We'll look back on this day and say, this was the end of it.
There is something to be said for battery swapping just in terms of, maintenance and repairs. Like, it's kind of like laptops. I used to have Apple laptops where you could replace your own battery, and that was a really nice feature. But of course, to make them smaller and lighter, they're now all super self-contained, and changing the battery is a huge deal. So it would be nice if cars could be designed just from a maintenance and repair perspective to just pop them in and out. That's our show for this week. Contact us, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. On social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. You can join the Patreon that we mentioned earlier and support the show by buying some merch. We got a merch store. Take the time to rate us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That always helps out the show to spread the word. So, and remember to subscribe.
Thank you to all our Patreon members. We love you. The Clean Club executive members who get mentioned every week are, who are they? Green Bastard and Brent Routley. Thank you, guys. And thank everyone else, including our supporter members who don't get mentioned on the podcast. And the Clean Club members get mentioned once a month or so. Remember, sign up, Clean Club. You get ad-free episodes, exclusive access to our Clean Energy Show Discord server, discounts on merch, early access to our episodes, behind-the-scenes material, and those coveted bonus podcasts, as well as shout-outs on our podcast. You guys make our podcast happen. Thanks to everyone. And if you don't want to pay money, you can still go there for free. This is what we're using for our social media page and duplicating all our social media posts there and putting free articles without paywalls on there that you can access and read about the clean energy transition. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you again in 7 days.
See you next week.